go ahead and call this meeting to order. If you would join me in the pledge of allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, the first item on our agenda is appointment of zone 5 trustee. So at this point, I would entertain a motion.
I move that we appoint zone 5 trustee. I move that we appoint zone 5 trustee Derek Moore and administrative officer.
Been moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
So moved.
Hey, Derek, I'm going to administer the oath, so just raise your right hand and repeat after me. I state your name.
I, Derek Moore,
Do swear
do swear
that I support the Constitution
that I support the Constitution
of the United States,
of the United States,
the Constitution and the laws
the Constitution and the laws
of the state of Idaho,
of the state of Idaho,
and that I will faithfully
and that I will faithfully
discharge all the duties
discharge all the duties
of the office of trustee
of the office of trustee
of Middleton School District 134
of Middleton School District 134
in Canyon County, state of Idaho,
in Canyon County, state of Idaho,
according to the best of my ability.
according to the best of my ability.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you, Derek. Welcome. Next item on our agenda is the approval of the agenda. This time I'd entertain a motion for agenda approval. Perfect. It's been moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? So moved. Moving along, item 5, our consent agenda, minutes, bills, budget, reports, MHS yearbook trip, and personnel report. Entertain a motion or question or discussion on consent. Been moved and seconded. Any discussion? Call for the vote. All in favor of the motion, say aye. Aye. Opposed? So moved. Moving right along, item 6. Darren, if you would help us conduct the budget hearing.
I'm just going to stand over here so I don't have to have my back to everyone. So this opens the public hearing for the fiscal year 20 and amended fiscal year 19 budget. So for those who aren't familiar, the school district budget runs from July 1st of every year till June 30th of the next year. So when it says fiscal year 19, that's from July 1st, 2018 through June 30th, 2019. So at this time, it is a public hearing, so after I kind of do the opening comments and kind of go over the changes in the budget and the budget plan for next year, then it's open for any comments that anyone has on the budget. So in the school district, we're operated on governmental funds. And the main primary fund of the school district is the general fund. So this is kind of the fund that's used for any funds that aren't dedicated for specific purposes. So most of my presentation is dedicated to the general fund because it is the largest fund and it is the primary fund of the school district. So this slide here shows the original budget of 2018-19. So this first column would show what was presented last June at this time and what the board adopted at that point. The middle column shows the revisions for fiscal year 19. So any changes that have happened throughout the year. Because when I project the budget, you know, in May, basically, I'm projecting our attendance for the following year. I'm trying to project salary numbers and placing teachers on the career ladder. So a lot happens between May and when the students actually show up in August and when we have staff show up in August, because there is turnover with staff. And then also, as you know, we're a growing district, so the attendance and enrollment also varies between that time. And then on the far right column, we'll show 1920. So this is the proposed budget for starting July 1st of 2019. You can see on the revenue for the general fund, this top part is local revenue. And you can see it totals about, proposed for next year is about 1.6 million. Our current fiscal year, it was close to about 1.9 million. The majority of the local funds comes through property tax collections. And up at the top, you'll see the main one we collect is the supplemental tax levy. And that's 1.3 million, which the voters approved in August of 2017. And they approved it for a 2-year cycle. So this 1.3 million is authorized by the voters. It was authorized for the 18-19 school year, and it's authorized for the 19-20 school year. So in order to continue that supplemental levy, that will need to be voted on again before the 2020-21 fiscal year. So most school districts, we've done it in August, but most school districts do that election in March because it's closer to, you kind of have a better idea of your budget at that point. So that's just something the board needs to consider for next March if we want to continue that supplemental. And this is really operation funds for the district. So that 1.3 million is pretty critical to the operations of the district. The other difference between our current year and next year on the taxes is the board approved 150,000 in emergency tax levies last year. That was approved in September of 2018. If you remember that, those funds were dedicated to our textbook adoption. So that all that 150 went to purchase the textbooks that we did this spring. So you can see for next year's budget, I haven't put in an emergency levy. The emergency levy can be levied by the school board if there is a growth in enrollment from the prior year. So they look at August 2019 and compare it with this August 2020. And if there's enough growth there, then the district can qualify for emergency levy, and all it takes is approval by the school board. There's no vote that has to go out to the citizens. It's just a school board authorization, basically. And in a future slide, I'll kind of break down all the property tax levies and how they kind of work for the school district. And going through these, really the other ones in the local, there's not a lot of changes. You will see our E-rate revenue. So E-rate is a federal program that reimburses our internet and WAN costs, and it also reimburses any tech equipment specific to our network. So like switches or basically switches. And so last year we actually bought some switches and E-rate reimbursed us. So that's why you see 100,000 And next year I projected 22,000, but we do have a proposal in to buy more switches. So if we do that, then we'll get reimbursed more. They reimburse, I believe it's about 60% of the cost on the E-rate. So I work with Mr. Kazakis on that because it's tied to technology. So then the next section down on revenue for the general fund is state revenue. And you can see state revenue, you know, 23.3.5 million next year. You can see that's a big chunk of our budget. When you're looking at a total budget of 24.9 million, you can see it's really tied to state revenue. And I'll kind of break these down in more details as we go. The base support is tied to student attendance, ADA, and it's still tied to that going into next year. There was talks about moving that to an enrollment base, but it is still attendance based for next year. So all these funds are driven by student attendance. So the better percentage of student attendance that we get, the more funding we'll get from the state. And currently we hover around 96 to 97% ADA, which is average daily attendance. So that's a really good percentage of students that are coming to school every day. So in this base support, the state also dedicates money for salary-based apportionment, you'll hear, and entitlement money. And I'll kind of break that down on the next slide. The next one is transportation. So we get reimbursed for our to and from school transportation costs. Extracurricular costs are not reimbursed by the state. So this $1,050,000, you'll kind of, so this is what we're actually getting reimbursed this year. I know this number, okay? So this is what we got reimbursed for the 2017-18 school year. So we pay for transportation the whole year, and then the state reimburses us the following February. So it's like whatever that is, a 7 to 8 month lag in reimbursement. And part of the transportation reimbursement is there is a cap on how much you can get reimbursed. So if you're spending too much, you could get capped on how much your reimbursement is. So that's why this amount is lower than this year, just because this reimbursement for next year will be the first time we've been with Caldwell Transportation. And we did switch Caldwell Transportation, but there was an increase in expenditures when we made that switch. So there is a possibility we could get capped. And if that is the case, I just wanted to be conservative on that reimbursement number. Because if I overshoot that and we get capped, it'll kind of cause problems in later on in the year. Because you won't know if you get capped. It's kind of funny, but you won't know if we got capped for the 18-19 school year until probably December or January coming up. So I kind of have a history of being pretty conservative on my initial budget. You'll see if you look at past history, usually my original budget is lower than my amended budget, because I just have never been a proponent of going to cut things after we've already given the budget. I'd rather have more money coming in and we can allocate more funds out than going the opposite direction. So usually my original budget is pretty conservative, and that's what the board's kind of approved in the past. Going down, some of the other, these are kind of self-explanatory. Exceptional child is a special ed reimbursement from the state, a pretty small amount. State paid benefits, so the state does reimburse us for PERSI, Social Security taxes for our staff, so that's what the paid benefits are. And then other state support is a whole bunch of stuff that comes from the state. So this would include like leadership dollars, which is on the agenda tonight for next year. The other one you'll hear about is IRI funds, which is kind of the Idaho Reading Indicator funding that the state gave. And really the reason for this increase is because of the IRI increase for next year. So that's why our state support is up for next year, because of that reading indicator. The next one down is the lottery and additional state maintenance revenue. This is revenue we get from the state to help cover maintenance costs throughout the district. This was a result of a lawsuit the state received from a small district that had some rundown, damaged buildings, and they sued the state saying they didn't get enough money to keep them up to date. So this is kind of a result of this, is the lottery money. When you see the commercials on TV that the lottery is giving so much to schools, this is what it is. It's to help support maintenance dollars at the school. So this is how much we get for that, $374,000. And really that kind of covers the general fund revenue. I kind of just hit on a few of the highlights. If the board has questions at any time, just raise your hand and I'll answer questions. And then I'll open it up at the end for any public comments or questions. Yep.
I know it looks like the same for the last 3 years. Is there something that?
So really it's the same because I haven't seen this year's number yet. It floats between like 35 to 50,000, and it's all based on the special ed students we have, how many days they're in attendance in our district. So it really just depends, but it's always floated at that.
And so when are they doing that data prior to that fiscal school year? I mean, or when do you get that?
We're submitting the reports right now showing how many students we have. And it's actually like a court ordered, it's for court ordered students. So if they're court ordered, so basically if they're not living in their primary home, say they're a foster child that's been court appointed to Middleton School District and he attends school in Middleton, he or she, then we'll get a reimbursement for the state. So just this piece of it is tied to those special circumstances. So really, I mean, it could fluctuate all the way down to zero. So I just kind of average out what the last 3 or 4 years have been. Any other questions on the revenue? Okay, let's go to the next slide. And this kind of breaks down the state distribution. So one of the main keys that the state looks at and how they fund everything is support units. And the support units is really tied to student attendance. And so the state looks at groupings of students and gives you a support unit based on how many students are in that grade level. So they'll look at 1st through 3rd grade, they'll give you a certain number. 4th through 6th grade, they give you a certain number. And then 7th through 12th grade, they'll give you a better number. So really when you look at that and how to explain it is the high school students, it takes 18 and a half high school students to get 1 support unit. Okay, for alternative schools, it takes 12 students to get 1 support unit. So you can see they're basically the state saying it costs more to educate those students, so they'll give you a support unit for less students. For example, 1st through 3rd grade is 26 students. So every 26 kids, you get 1 support unit. So you can see the high school kids, you get a little more money for versus the lower grade levels, just because that's kind of how the state has dictated how funding goes. They're saying it costs more to fund students who are older or farther along in school. So anyway, so I plug in our enrollment, I look at our average daily attendance over the past 3 or 4 years, and this is how I come up with support units. Yeah.
Those support units, is that the same number that they use for the charter school, or how does that work now that we have a neighbor?
Yep, so every public school in Idaho, even charter schools, use support units to get their funding from the state. And there is a couple different caveats with charter schools, but the main premise is the same. That, basically, for example, if 100 kids were at Middleton and now they're at Forge, instead of us getting, I'll approximate like 5 support units for those 100 kids, Forge will get those 5 support units because now those students are with Forge. So it's the exact same funding for the charters or regular public schools. The main thing here that I want to show you, because this 195 doesn't mean a lot to you, I just want to show that for next year's budget, I'm budgeting flat growth. And part of that is I do have some concern about how many kids are going to go to Forge out of Middleton School District. Because you're right, if Forge takes 150 kids and the district doesn't grow 150 more kids and come into our schools, we're going to have some budget problems because my projection is going to be off. So basically, I projected that whatever Forge takes, we're going to be able to maintain that with growth from people moving into the district. And the last few years, we have grown at least 100 kids, sometimes 175 kids. So I mean, it should be there. It's just a matter of in August, we have to make sure that that's how many kids really show up. that we hit that support unit target, so the funding's there for next school year.
And Darren, will you just, I think it's important for the public to know too, that we do talk to Forge and we share numbers, so we have kind of an idea, so it's not just a guess of a random number and think, okay, we're just gonna use 100 because that's a nice round number. We actually do talk to them, and those numbers are based on conversations with them, so it gives us a pretty accurate idea of what we're looking at.
Yeah, exactly. And you can see this is what I budgeted last year, so I was off 0.1. I mean, that's pretty close. So hopefully next year, like I said, it just depends on where the enrollment's at. But that's something that just needs to be closely monitored. In my position, that's something that you have to make sure that support unit's there. Because if for some reason the kids don't come and they end up going more to Forge than what they're telling us, then that's where you would see it in that support unit number. That's going to impact funding for next year. So basically what the state does, they take this support unit number, they put it in a nice little easy to understand Excel spreadsheet, and they kick out this salary-based apportionment number. And you can see from fiscal year 20 to the amended budget for next year, we're up, about 850,000 in salary benefit apportionment. So that includes the money the state's giving us for the 5th year of the career ladder that they funded, that we have already approved through negotiations. It also includes the administrative increases that the state gave and the classified increases that the state gave through revenue. So this all shows up through the salary benefit-based apportionment. State entitlement, what it does, it takes your support units and then multiplies it by a number to give you entitlement or discretionary money. So this is just money that the district can use for anything. Most of it goes to help with salary benefit overages, transportation costs, utility costs, all those things just to operate the school that the state doesn't have dedicated funding for. So you can see between these two numbers, you get a total salary-based apportionment and entitlement. And you can see that of our general fund, basically those two calculations make up 84% of our revenue of the general fund. And for our amended budget, it makes up about 82% of our budget. So these are important things that play into our revenue. So you can see a minor miss on support units could really impact the revenue we receive for the general fund.
Can you tell me, was the career ladder funded for 5 years by the legislature? Is that all? So we don't know what next year looks like as far as funding guaranteed for the career ladder?
Correct. Yep. When the legislature passed it 5 years ago, they put it in Idaho code. They put in the career ladder and the increases, and it was actually in statute. But it only went through the 1920 school year. So something is going to have to kick in legislatively so we know what the funding will look like for next year. So this is just kind of the overview of the main categories of the general fund. So this is on the expense side. So all that, even though it says salary and benefit apportionment, that's how the state calculates the revenues that come to us. This is how we actually spend the money once we get it. And you can kind of see when you look at the district's budget overall, these top two categories, salaries and benefits, when you add those two numbers together, I mean, you're looking at over 80% of the budget is tied to salaries and benefits. So, and most of those are through contracted employees, either certified teachers, administrators. So they're already on contracts for next year. You can see the increases in cost on the salary side. That was through the career ladder and the increases you guys approved last month with classified administrators. On the benefits side, the PERSI rate did go up. So what we contribute to PERSI for each employee did go up a little bit. And then also you guys have approved the health insurance increases that we received from Blue Cross. That was all done last month at the board meeting. So between those two, you can see the large increase in cost is really going to the salaries and benefits side. The next category, purchase services. The big one on that is our bus contract, and then utility costs, are the two main ones that come out of purchase services. So you can see a difference in the original budget versus the amended budget versus the proposed budget. And the reason is going into the Caldwell transportation contract, when I did the original budget, I estimated a little high. I think that contract came in about 1.6 million, and I was a little over, well, 1,650,000 is what we paid for the year, and I think I had budgeted $1.8 million. So, you know, and that, it's hard when you have a new contract, you're really not sure. So as I kind of mentioned earlier, I'm pretty conservative, so I shot high, and we saved some money there, which you can see will show in our contingency reserve fund going into next year. On the supplies, you can see it started low, went up, and now it's gone back down. And the main difference there is because of the 150,000 in the emergency levy that we put into textbooks. So obviously textbooks falls under supplies and materials. So a lot of that increase is because of the additional money that we dedicate towards the textbook adoption. Capital outlay, not a lot of change there. That's just equipment that we purchased. Insurance and judgments, this is just our liability and building insurance throughout the district. So that will stay pretty flat. They do see a little increase for next year. So that kind of breaks down the revenue, the expenditures for next year. Okay. And this just kind of highlights those main costs on the general fund expenditures that I talked about. I kind of already mentioned these, but those top two categories, salaries and benefits. On the certified side, we did the 5th year of the career ladder, steps and lanes. So certified staff that gain a year of experience will move down, and then they'll also move across if they gain additional degrees or credits. The starting salary for all certified staff next year is $38,500. Administrator, same thing, steps and lanes, 3% increase on the base. The classified staff, steps, and then 3.5% increase on the base. And then on the benefit side, I didn't have the Percy, but the 6.5% health insurance increase was the big one, or the additional cost. And obviously, you also have additional costs on benefits because your Social Security taxes and your Percy is based on the salary amount. So when the salary goes up, obviously you're going to pay more benefits because you pay more taxes and contribute more to the Percy plan as well. And general fund, this is kind of the fund balance. The board does have a board policy keeping a 5% fund balance. So this kind of just shows a history of kind of where it's floated since I've been here. Well, not since I've been here longer than this, but for the last 8 years. And you can see we knew this number was high back in June 2017. So what happened between here and there, if you guys remember, is the state allocated, I don't even remember what it was for. They basically had extra money, and they said, here, school districts, you take it. So it was quite a bit of money that came to us at the I think they sent it actually they sent it after the fiscal year in July, but they said, oh, this is for the previous school year. So it really increased our fund balance because we didn't even know we were going to get it until the end of June. So ever since we received that money, we plan to try to spend that down to get us back to, the 5% target that the board has set. And you can see we've kind of slowly worked that down last year. So that was the fund balance as of June 30th of 2018. And for June 30th of 2019, to get to the 5% that's in board policy, we needed a little over 1.2 million. And we were going to be very close to that. I ran it the other day. That was before I even looked at what this 5% number was, and I was right around 1.2 million. So I think we're going to be really close there. So this is basically just your contingency going into next school year. It's really just a carryover, and hopefully you don't have to use it, but it's there as kind of a fallback. Okay. So this slide kind of breaks down our property tax. It does break down our property taxes. On the top, it shows what we actually levied for the 2018 tax year. You can see it's broken into 4 categories: the bond or the debt service account, the emergency, which I talked about, the tort levy, and the supplemental levy, which we kind of talked about earlier. Basically, all that bond money goes into a dedicated fund to pay our debts The main debt we have right now is for the high school that was built a few years ago. We're still paying that debt down. And you'll be paying that basically 20 years from when that high school was built. So it was on a 28-year repayment plan. So going into next year, you know, basically, in order, if we want to keep the levy rate the same, the bond amount would go to this, and your supplemental and court levy would be at that level. I have shared this with Eric Herringer of Piper Jaffray, who is kind of an expert in all this stuff as far as the bond fund and all that. That is a really good resource for us. And the main thing is that we put this in the budget, but really this right here is not adopted by the board till September 15th, or not September 15th, the first part of September. Because you have to certify this levy rate to the county by the first Thursday following the first Monday in September. Follow that? So basically the Thursday after Labor Day, or you can file an extension, which I usually do, and the board will approve it at the September board meeting. Okay? And so in saying that, if we really get the market value growth that we're looking at, say 10% or more, then we probably will look at lowering this levy rate again. But we just we don't have the data right now to make a good decision. Like, I don't have the market value for next year yet. And that's like the key component to figuring out the tax rate is what is the taxable market value of the school district. And at this point, we just don't have it. And honestly, we don't get it until the first part of August. So the key is we put in a number in our budget, and as long as the budget is more than what we actually levy, then we don't have to go back to the school board for a kind of a revision before we adopt that L2 in September. So this number, basically, long story short, this number on the bond fund is high right now, and you guys will have to certify it in September and get it dialed into exactly what we want. And I recommend, like, the Eric Herringer is the best resource. He knows our debt. He has a strategy for the best way to pay off our debt and cost the taxpayers the least amount of money. So whatever we do, we just kind of run it by him, and he gives us good recommendations. And he'll look at that rate and see if we can adjust it. If you remember, in 2017, this rate was $4.95. So we did drop it 50 cents last year. And I don't know, but I'm pretty optimistic that we should be able to drop it again in September of this year for next tax year. Okay.
Do we have to keep reapplying for the state, when the state picks up our insurance, or not our insurance, our interest payments on those bonds that are outstanding? Do we have that for the high school bonds, and is that something we reapply for, or is it just one and done? Like, we got it and qualify for it, so they'll pay it the length of the bond?
Yeah, so what Alicia's talking about is there's a state program called bond levy equalization. And when we ran the high school bond at that time, we qualified for levy equalization. So they pay, it depends on a lot of different factors, but they pay about 30 to 35% of our total debt payments. So that includes principal and interest. So that money comes from the state, and the rest has to be covered from the property tax levy. But no, that funding comes directly from Tim Hill, and he has all the information that he needs to continue paying that. So there's nothing I do on an annual basis that applies for it. Every once in a while they'll ask for information like, okay, what's your debt payment schedule, or what's your bond payment schedule? And they actually did that a couple weeks ago. And I just forwarded it on to Eric and Michael and Piper Jaffray, and they send it to Tim Hill. So it's only if you ask for information, but we're kind of on their radar. That they know how much they need to pay us over the next, however many years are left on that debt. And that is significant dollars, because I think last year was close to 1.2 million. So it's quite a bit that comes through that helps pay off some of that debt that we don't have to levy on our property tax owners. So the other funds that I'm not going to go into detail tonight are going to pop up right now. Yeah, there you go. So the local state, so these are other dedicated dollars that we get from the state or through other organizations. So what we've received in the past, a TLC grant, I don't have anything budgeted for next year, but those are funds that we received in 18-19 school year. Driver's ed, the state reimburses us kind of on a per kid, for every kid that attends driver's ed here. So that's a shared cost. The student pays a portion, and then the state reimburses us a portion. So we fill out that paperwork after every session, send it to the state, and they reimburse us. State vocational, those are dedicated dollars that the state gives for career technical education. So that includes our ag classes up at the high school, our business courses at the high school that qualify, and also the FCCLA programs, which is the family consumer science programs at high school. So those are dollars that we get to help with supplies and equipment in those classrooms, which can be pretty substantial. I mean, 40 to 50,000 to help support those programs with supplies and materials. Technology, the state gives us dedicated dollars for IT staffing and classroom technology funding that we use for that. State substance abuse, this is a program the state uses. We use a portion of this to help cover the SRO costs for the district. So the SRO is shared between these state dedicated dollars, and then our general fund also picks up the other portion of that. Debt service, these are the bond payments. That property tax line item for bonds goes into this debt service account. The bond levy equalization money that we receive from the state goes into that account, and it's all used to pay down debt. And if there is a buildup in that account, we do have certain bonds that we can pay early. So Eric and Michael also work with me on that. If we have extra funds that build up in that, we can pay down the debt early, kind of like just prepaying, a mortgage or something like that. We can pay it down early, so we save costs later on. And then on the federal funds, these are the federal funds that we receive. The top two, Title I and Title I migrant. Those are federal funds. We don't have to apply for. They're just kind of given to us based on free and reduced numbers. We do have to do a kind of an application or a budget application to the state on how we're going to spend those funds. Medicaid, that's a reimbursable program, federal program, that if the student's Medicaid eligible or qualifies, then certain things that we provide are reimbursable to a certain extent. Title VI-B and Title VI-B preschool, those are special ed programs. So Title VI-B would be all special ed across the district that helps fund either certified staff or classified staff for special ed. Title VI-B preschool, it helps with the cost of the preschool program up at Purple Sage. Definitely doesn't cover the whole cost, but it does relieve some of the cost from the general fund. Carl Perkins, similar to the state vocational, it's for career technical education. Same thing, they allocate monies for equipment and professional development for those teachers up at the high school. Title II-A is a federal program that helps with professional development for our staff. Food service or child nutrition, that's kind of a shared program with federal. Obviously, students that pay for school lunches will go in there, but also we submit reimbursement for those who qualify for free and reduced meals. So that's why it's under the federal programs. Title I-D was a small program we received in 18-19 to help with neglected and delinquent students. And then Title IV was also a federal program that we got money for in 18-19. And that helped with the main focus was the after school program over at the middle school. Kind of a carryover from the 21st Century Grant, but just kind of a different funding source. It's more of a scaled down version at the middle school. So when you look at that, for the 20 and 19 budget, basically an extra $10 million comes into the school district through these programs. And once again, these are dedicated programs, so we track these differently in a separate fund. So when auditors come or whoever, we can really decipher how we're using those funds. Any other questions? Kind of all I had.
No, I just wanted to say thanks for all of your hard work over the last few, we'll call it few, but the many years and time that you've spent here. And also, I really appreciate you reaching out to the administrators and the different principals and helping them learn to budget and help us all be good stewards of the taxpayer money, because you play a key role in that and we couldn't do without you. So we appreciate you. Thank you.
Yeah, since this is a hearing, if there's anybody who would like to ask a question from the audience.
Okay, oh, is it on? Okay, so I'm new to all of this financial stuff. Oh, Gina Hallam. I'm more of a motivational speaker and not a financial speaker. But one of the things I was looking at in the 300 plus pages of the agenda was some expenditures that kind of caught my eye. When teachers go on these trips with students, students are supposed to pay for their meals. But teachers, I noticed some of them, $20 breakfast, $22 lunch, $25 dinner. Is there a way to get a per diem for each of the days that the teachers are gone? If the teachers aren't going to pay for their meals, then they get a set amount, not $60+ a day. Because personally, I don't spend $60 a day for lunch or for meals. And so I think that's one way to be able to better balance that part of the budget, because it's a little eccentric when you have mahi-mahi for dinner and wine when you're on a trip. So that was just my thought. I don't know where I was supposed to ask it, but I figured I'd bring it up and see if there's something that can be done.
Thank you very much. Garen?
Yeah, so I'll kind of address the question. So we do have advanced per diem is the primary function of what the staff is supposed to use. And the board adopted a policy, or the board has a policy that we follow the state per diem rate. So we did have an employee who did go on a trip who didn't maybe understand the per diem policy. So we have discussed that and worked with that individual. But yeah, common practice is the staff will come to our office, and actually we'll give them an advance so they don't have to front the money up front. And that's just for the meal portion of it. And it is a set amount, and it is reduced if they leave later in the day. For example, if they're only getting dinner versus if they're gone a full day. So that is in board policy, and we do follow that 95% of the time.
Do you know the amount per day? Just curious. Are there any other questions?
I'm Rory Wood. Just a couple of questions. One, there you mentioned the possible loss of some of the students to the charter school. Do we have any idea, as charter schools become more and more popular, not necessarily this one in Middleton, but students we may lose to others throughout the area of the community? Have we considered that or factored that in at all?
Yeah, for next year, we've really focused on the Forge one. We have communicated with Elevate Academy, which is opening an alternative high school over in Caldwell. The hard part is their boundary doesn't come into the Middleton School District. So those charters have larger boundaries than school district boundaries. For example, Forge's boundary, I think, goes all the way from New Plymouth, Parma that way, all the way into Eagle. So it kind of overlaps a bunch of school district boundaries. So them and Vision are the only charters that currently have a boundary shared with Middleton School District. So those are the kind of the two that we've focused on. And they do impact us. vision impacts us on the kindergarten level. And then usually, you don't see that much past that because those kids, once they're in there, kind of stay in there. But at this point, the main one we're focused on is sports, just because it's a new one. Appreciate that.
On the idea of the state entitlement, the discretionary money, I think you mentioned to the district, do we have an itemized of where that is used or allocated or paid for? It was the 5.5 million, 5.3 in 2019, 5.5 in 2020.
Yeah, so there's really two main things that are kind of discretionary dollars that we get. The 5.5 is the discretionary money from the state, and then really the supplemental levy, the 1.3 million, is also similar, that it really doesn't have any strings attached to it. But we don't have a detailed breakdown. It basically covers any additional costs that aren't funded through the salary and benefit apportionment or through other dedicated state dollars. So when you look at it, a majority of it goes to salaries and benefits, because what happens is we pay, and every district in the state pays more than what the state reimburses us. So in order to be competitive around the area, that's kind of where those funding goes. The state also, part of that discretionary allocation is dedicated to health insurance. So it does go to fund our staff's health insurance, which is a pretty large cost for our district as well.
But there's not like an itemized list of where it's going and how much is going?
We don't know.
Thank you.
At this time, any others? All right, seeing none, we'll move on. Thank you, Darren. Item 7 on the agenda, we're into the action items. Item A, consider approval of the above hearing request to amend our current school district budget 2018-19 budget.
Action item 8.
It's been moved and seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none, we'll go into vote. All in favor of item 7A, consider approval of the above hearing request to amend our current school district 2018-2019 budget. Favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? So moved. Item 7B, consider approval of the above hearing request to adopt our proposed school district 2019-2020 budget.
I make a motion to approve action item 7B.
It's been moved and seconded. Any discussion? Seeing none, we'll call for the vote. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? So moved. Yeah, we have an answer to the per diem question.
Yeah, so this is, so our policy basically says we'll follow the state controller's office policy. So they kind of do the research and base it on that. So for in-state travel, it's $49, and for out-of-state, it's $55 a day. And then, for example, if they're only gone, for dinner, it's back, depending on, it has it broken down by breakfast, lunch, or dinner.
Thank you.
Sorry. So are they well aware of that? So obviously the one that didn't have to come before the reimburse the district, or?
Correct. The one that kind of came up, it was actually through the professional technical funding. So they didn't go through, normally they'll go through Lisa's office, which is our professional development funding. So usually Lisa, who's her staff person, will make sure they do it properly. And this person had their own CTE funding, so they just didn't know the proper channel. So we made sure to communicate that.
Thank you. All right, item 7C, consider approval of our plan to utilize state funding for leadership positions.
Lisa Pennington, Director of Curriculum and Assessment. Let me pull that up for you, sorry. We wanted to run this plan by you. the state allocates every year a certain amount of dollars that go towards leadership funding. And so there's certain stipulations around how we can utilize those dollars. The way that we put the plan together is we work with the district leadership team. And so we work with that team of teachers, administrators, stakeholders to determine how this looks. And so we brought them together a while back. It would have been in May at this point. And we had a meeting and we went through this presentation with them, elicited feedback, and determined that this was the presentation we want to bring in front of the board. So this presentation kind of outlines all those, and then also in front of you, we have specific job descriptions for some of the positions that we're going to talk through on this presentation. So you can see more specifics around what those leadership dollars are spent towards and what the personnel we talk about do to earn those leadership dollars. The other piece of this is each leadership stipend that we receive from the state also says that we have to allocate so much back out to a staff member. So there's a minimum dollar amount that we have to give back out to each staff member, and then no certain staff member can earn over 25% of that leadership money based on the base salary, so the 38.5. So no one staff member could earn more than 25% of that 38.5 in that allocation. So that's kind of how that divvies out. Anything else, Darren, that I should? Okay. So we look at the way that the stipends were divvied out this last year, and then how we want to forecast that and any changes we might want to make. There's some building level stipends that we really made no changes from last year's leadership stipends to this year's leadership stipends. So you can see that each building, K8, gets 2 leadership stipends for their building. And then the high school gets 4 leadership stipends, and the academy also gets 2. And so that's how those building level stipends are divvied out amongst those buildings. Most buildings this year, when we talk to administrators, teachers of those buildings, have the same plan for those specific building leadership stipends that they use this year. So some examples would be, there was a senior graduation coordinator at the high school, or at some of the elementaries, they utilize like a sunshine committee or somebody that can come in and offer some of those positive incentives for teachers and just really boost morale. And so those are just a few examples of how those are done at the building level. When we look at the next slide, we get to our district level teams, and this is where the majority of the stipends really sit. And when we looked here, the only change from last year to this year would be the curriculum leads piece of this. And so this year we had our district leadership team. That's going to stay intact, and it's 2 representatives from each building that we allocate leadership stipends there for. The RTI lead, same thing. It was K8. We had 2 representatives from each building. We've had a request to include K12 and add 2 more leadership stipends there. And so that would be a change that we're looking to make for next year. TIAC. Just increase. You're fine. No, you're fine. As he does this, I'll explain the TIAT position. So TIAT has representatives from each building as well, and that's the Technology Integration Advisory Team. And then the curriculum leads, there's a few changes we're making here. We had math leads and ELA leads from each building. And we've gone through our math adoption, we've gone through our ELA adoption, and what we found is we're sitting down to meet with these specific teams, but we're kind of having the same conversations because it's really expanding outside of just math and ELA. So we're getting into more curricular shifts and instructional shifts at each building level. And so we've just merged those 2 teams together and had the same amount of representatives. And the other piece that we've added to that is we wanted to make sure we included all departments at the secondary level. Instead of just math and ELA, we want to include social studies, CTE, all of the other departments that exist, so that there's representation, not just for that, but also like PE, music, and we're hearing from all of those voices as well. So we've added those positions. We've also added SPED representation into this, so we make sure we have that voice being heard at the table as well. So we've increased the team size, but it's really to make sure we have that teacher voice coming back out through all those curriculum, instruction, and assessment decisions around adoptions, implementation, assessment pieces, windows of time, whatever it might be that they have questions around. So that's a big shift. Not a big shift, but that's the shift we made there, is just merging those 2 teams together and adding some positions so we included all departments and not just made it specific for ELA and math. So when we look at the next piece of this is just the last piece, and there's some stipends here that don't fall necessarily in what we've just talked about. And so the leadership stipends, we've talked through this. There's a few other positions that come into play, and that's on this sheet that I gave you guys that has specific job descriptions on it. And so the first part of this are what we covered in the first few slides. The bottom portion of leadership stipends have to do with other specific leadership positions that we offer throughout the district. So we had studio teacher, which is when teachers go in and really have an open classroom. It's peer observation type of situations. And we have teachers volunteer to go in and teach a lesson for a different teacher, and other teachers come in to watch them. They also have open classrooms, so teachers can watch them at any time and really get some of that reflective feedback peer to peer. The mentor teachers leads, this is where any teacher new to our district or in their first few years of education have a teacher mentor, and the leads on that are those teacher mentors that help those other individuals. The curriculum adoption committee, that's year to year. The size of that varies. Next year will be a little bit smaller as we're looking at that science adoption, so we won't have as many leadership stipends there, but still the same amount of representation from each grade level and building. The wellness committee chair is something we've had for the last few years, and it's somebody that takes on really the wellness initiative, offers wellness for staff, runs MChat, and does those pieces for us. Title I coordinator, EL coordinator. We're looking at splitting some of those duties out and allowing a leadership position there to help support those two programs, and looking at budgets with some of the shifts coming with personnel next year. And then the medical assistant supervisor, same thing. We've hired a medical assistant to help with the nursing area. And so we have a supervisor that will help oversee paperwork, their day-to-day operations with patients and those pieces, just to make sure we stay in statute there what we need to do. Hard to fill positions, we've defined on the sheet for you as well, but we always have those for special education and Middleton Academy. Teaching staff is where those usually sit. And then the extended days, this is all the same as what we projected for this last year. The school psychologists, the librarians, counselors, and instructional specialists have a few extended days on their contracts, which are before or after the regular school teacher contract. So that's kind of the whole thing in a nutshell of how we're going to allocate those funds in the budget and what's been presented. So questions, yeah.
Is there any feedback that you're giving or offering, like a survey to teachers that utilize these teams and the coaches to make sure that what's going on in the schools is being well received and is needed, and you know, any surveys or anything that's coming back?
Constantly.
Okay.
Yeah, we really try to reach out to administrators, teachers on really everything that we're doing, and if there's benefit there, and if there's not, ways we can improve. And so I would say 90% of these have been surveyed at some point, or the work on the committee has been surveyed by all staff, so then we know if the committee has been beneficial for its purpose as well. And we can share data with you guys too if you'd like to see some of that as well.
You also mentioned kind of joining two teams together. So how often do you look at that and make sure that it's functioning like you anticipate and want it to, and then make adjustments? How often do you make adjustments to your?
I would say constantly. So this is a proposal we'll make for next year. Some of these teams, given whatever might come in August, if it's not necessary, then we'll cut back. Or if there's positions that we feel like maybe weren't represented the way that we needed them to, then we'll elicit feedback and figure out, do we need to add a position here, or what does that look like? We obviously have to stay in what the state allocated funds are. So it's kind of giving up something here to make sure this is working well, but we're constantly having those conversations.
Thanks, Lisa.
Yeah.
So who are the stakeholders that decided how to this?
So this was put in front of the district leadership team. And so if you look at that, we have 2 representatives from each building, along with their principal or administrator, along with board member, representative, and then directors from the district, superintendent, assistant superintendent. And so that entire committee is what this is put in front of and reviewed by prior to coming to you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Currently, the Title I and the EL, was that done by the same person currently as one stipend on top of their regular duties, or how is that currently being achieved?
So those are part of our federal program funding. And so currently that falls within my realm and Mr. Horning's realm as the assistant superintendent, and we work with Darren on that. given some of the shifts that potentially could come next year, Title I breaking out of that, we're looking at empowering somebody else to kind of look at that specific allocation, so then that entire federal program workload doesn't fall on one person if it's not within a specific duty. And then the EL coordinator is a separate person. So we're looking at 2 separate people to do that potentially. The EL coordinator is something we had this year, but we want to make sure that we give them leadership stipends to do that in the future. Thank you. You're welcome.
Any other questions?
Thank you.
Entertain a motion at this time on item 7C, consider approval of our plan to utilize state funding for leadership positions.
I move that we consider to approve the utilization of state funding for leadership positions.
It's been moved and seconded. Any discussion? Seeing none, we'll move on to the vote. All in favor of item 7C, approval to utilize state funding for leadership positions, say aye. Aye. Opposed? So moved. Item 7D, consider approval of the student handbook for our 6 schools for the 2019-2020 school year.
I'll make the motion to approve the handbooks for the 6 schools for the 2019-20 school year.
It's been moved and seconded. If there's any discussions or any questions of Mr. Horn.
Just note for the board, I did have an email that I sent to Mr. Horning earlier regarding the see something, say something. I just wanted to make sure it was consistent and needed some clarification there as to, is it up and running? Is everyone using it? Is it just the staff? Is it just the students? And if that needed to be included or not in our handbook. And do we have a decision on that? Or do we
I'm going to have it up and running for the student handbook component. So it'll be in the student handbook, but not in the staff handbook. One other thing I'd like to add is that there will be some adjustments to these just with the policy numbers, just to be consistent as we transfer from the 3-digit to the 4-digit. So there might be a few changes still just in what policy numbers will be in there. The principals work very hard to match policy with expectations within the handbook, because we don't want something in the handbook to differ than policy. Policy trumps handbook. And so Jesse's done a great job of working with that with the elementaries. So you will notice that all 3 elementaries have a student handbook, and all principals work very hard to update it so that they have a strong reference if any issues come up next year.
So just for clarification, so all 3 elementary school handbooks will look the same?
Yep, that's correct. Thank you. And we are working to provide a digital class for the staff to take when they come back through our safe schools that will cover some of the important policies that will need to be covered that are in the staff handbook.
Just one last question. I don't know if I read this or if I'm off, but did I read somewhere that everyone has to sign off, or just the staff has to sign off that they read it, or do parents have to sign off that they read it?
Next year, we're going to focus on staff taking that class, and that will show that they've reviewed the staff handbook and are aware of policies. And the student one, each school will do it differently. They'll either have an assembly, they can do a video presentation, but it's expected that they do get the highlights of the student handbook with all kids to start the year.
Thank you.
Any more discussion? Question? Call for the vote. Item 7D, consider approval of student handbook for our 6 schools for the 2019-2020 school year. All in favor of the motion, say aye. Opposed? So moved. Thank you. Item 7E, consider approval of the MHS swim co-op with Caldwell, Ridgeview, and Valley View. Entertain a motion for discussions.
I move that we approve item 7E.
Been moved and seconded. Questions or discussion?
Andy Aiken's not here, is he?
No, I talked to him. Are there any questions? Basically, this is a program that will be, facilities are hard to come by, so I believe it's College of Idaho that is allowing us to use their pool. It would be our school, 2 of the Valley View schools, and then a Caldwell school. So he sent you a form that has the 3 different schools. We would just add ours and then divide it by 4 instead of 3, cutting down significantly in cost. We do have, like, I think 10 to 15 kids that are very interested. Some are very talented. Basically, how he would treat it would be very similar to how we do golf. If they have to drive out to the golf course, they would have their own transportation out for swim.
And these individuals, they're competing as a co-op, so they still represent Middleton at
My
meetings.
understanding. Yep.
And then, is there a coach yet?
That's the hard part right now. They're looking right now. They've got the facility, they've got the interest, they just don't have a head coach who's interested. So hopefully they find one. I think all 4 of the ADs are searching hard right now. Yeah.
Any more discussion? Call for the vote. 7E, consider approval of the MHS swim co-op with Caldwell, Ridgeview, and Valley. All in favor of the motion, say aye. Aye. Opposed? So moved. Item 7F, consider approval of early graduation request.
I make a motion to approve action item 7F, consider approval of early graduation request.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there any questions or discussion?
Can I just get clarification? We approved the application for early graduation, but not all the steps have been completed. Is that?
It's my understanding the student's currently in summer school, possibly finishing up some of the IDLA classes as well. So I believe it was at the conclusion of the summer school session is when the student would have all their credits to graduate, then complete all the requirements. It says summer school of 19, summer of 19, online.
So we approve it, but yeah, it doesn't, they have to get everything done.
Correct. Yeah.
Before they graduate. All the requirements have to be met. We just approve that if they do reach that mark, that they can graduate. Any more discussion? Call for the vote. Item 7F, consider approval of early graduation request. All in favor, say aye. Opposed? So moved. Item 7G, destruction of outdated curriculum materials. And Lisa has some.
So before we move on to that, I want to make one correction to our leadership stipends. In the district leadership team, we also have the MEA representative. And so I don't know if it's listed on your document, but that position will still remain intact. So we have that MEA representative that's also on that team as well. So on the destruction of outdated curriculum materials, we've obviously done our ELA adoption this year. With that, we now have a situation where we have several adoption cycles worth of old ELA curriculum that we need to get rid of. And so the process we've used so far is we've had each school kind of collect that, have it in a room. We've had a company come in and audit it to determine where we have value and what we can sell back, and then really where there is no value left. And so that company we have come in kind of gives us the up-to-date information as far as districts around us, districts in the Pacific Northwest, and what materials they're using. So if there's anything within that other districts are using, they can purchase it from us and resell it to those other districts. So we've done that. Throughout that process, we've taken in about 4,400, almost 4,500 of revenue doing that and selling materials that still had value. Outside of that, we really don't have anything left at this point that has value as far as monetary value goes. And so the rest of it, we'd like to ask for permission to go ahead and have Western Records come in to each of those buildings, collect that material and shred it and take care of it for us at this point. And so if you look in your board packet, the cost, the quote we've received from them is $4,500. And so really what we've collected in revenue is offsetting what the cost would be to get rid of it at this point. So we're really $40 shy of that offsetting each other. So the cost to us right now would be about $40 to get rid of the rest materials. Oh, geez.
The question was, how far back are we going?
We haven't, just so you guys are aware, really gotten rid of anything since the fire and even prior to that. And so I would say we're going back probably 3 ELA adoption cycles. And so we have open court from 2002, 2005. We have CKLA materials that are probably our most up-to-date materials. But we're probably looking at about 3 adoption cycles, so 15 years or more worth of material. And we all know what our status was, and so we had that tendency to hoard and keep everything we could. So we have a lot to take care
of. This time I entertain a motion for item 7G.
I make a motion to approve item 7G.
I'll second that.
It's been moved and seconded. Any discussion?
I just had a question. Is there any value to say if any community members want it that they can come get it, or is that just opening a hornet's nest?
We've thought about it. The tough part about what we have is the consistency in it. And so as far as the inventory goes, or if there was somebody that we needed certain amounts of it, it's kind of, since there hasn't been a systematic approach, it would be difficult to be able to communicate to them what exactly would have value for them or their need. And so, I mean, if there's something out there that somebody wants to reach out to me before we take care of it, I'm open to helping them out, figure out if there's something that potentially could be there for them. It would really depend on their need and what we have. Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
That's high school all the way down.
K-12. Yep, K-12.
Any more discussion? Seeing none, call for the vote on item 7G, destruction of outdated curriculum material. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? So moved. Item 7H, selection of new auditor for 2019, for 2018, 2019 through 2020, 21. And Darren, if you'd like to give us some background.
Yeah, so we did an RFP process to look for a new auditor for the next 3 years. And when we did this, we contacted our current auditors, or who have been our auditors in the past, and they're really trying to get out of the audit business. The CPA has kind of tried to slow down a little bit and get out, so they didn't submit a proposal, and I kind of knew that going into it. So we did the RFP, we received 2 proposals, so we reviewed the proposals, then we did interviews with both CPA firms, and with that, we recommend Quest CPAs for our new auditor. They're based out of Payette. During the interview process, they were just very knowledgeable. They're the largest firm in Idaho that does school districts. So they do 62 charter and school districts across the state. And they also do other governmental entities along with that. But they do everything, they said, from, I believe, Kamei to Twin Falls. So they have kind of a broad, clientele there. They did a lot of research on Middleton. They had already talked to our previous auditors to kind of gain a background and information on what we currently, or how we've been in the past. And they have taken, the other thing is it can kind of be a tough transition going from auditor to auditor, but they've taken over audits from Bowen Parker Day before. So I think it'll be a smooth transition. They were also the lowest cost proposal. So their cost was the same as what we paid last year to Bowen Parker Day. So there won't be an additional cost. So that's kind of why we came with the recommendation for question. He is very professional and just very knowledgeable over the questions we asked them during the interview process.
Entertain a motion.
Second that.
Been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, we'll call for the vote. Item 7H, selection of new auditor for 2018-19 through 2020-21. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? So moved. In your packet, there is a resignation letter from Dr. Josh Milton, our superintendent. If you have any questions or give you a second to read that, then we can make a motion. Accept it. Have a motion to accept it.
I make a motion that we accept the resignation letter. Or the resignation. I'll second that.
It's been moved and seconded. Any discussion? We do have the option to post this. Is everybody comfortable with posting this on the school website? Okay. Call for the question. All in favor of accepting Dr. Milton's resignation letter, say aye. Aye. Opposed? So moved. This will be posted on the school website tomorrow for those who are interested. Item 7J, ISBA Superintendent Search Services, information and discussion. There was some information that the ISBA sent to me that was forwarded out. I had a chance to look at it today regarding what the ISBA offers, 2 different levels that they offer, and how we want to pursue searching for the new superintendent and utilizing their services. We can utilize we can go outside. We can also, I think they have a really good means by which to put out that information and work with them to achieve high quality. Is there any yeah, we'll want to pursue that item. Action item 7K is superintendent search. We can make that motion and then discuss it to utilize them, and then also utilize which level we want to do.
I make a motion to approve action item K, superintendent search
Through the ISBA.
through the ISBA.
Been moved and seconded. Discussion on it. There are 2 levels of authorization, or their authorization. They offer a their base package, which is $3,000, which includes basically helping us formulate a search and then advertising it, and then that's it. The second level is that plus the opportunity for them to work with us in helping select, interview, and utilize community and different options of how to make that work better for us. They also come alongside us and help us analyze the candidates. And that level, I think, is 8,300. There is $6,000 reimbursable from the state for using that services, for utilizing their services. So we would, out of pocket, be 2,300, I believe, for utilizing their services.
Can you tell me if this is, so we're really late in the season to hire and look for a superintendent. So is this only if we initiate, I guess explain to me, or have we talked about the discussion of an interim versus if we wait until hire in the spring, will they help us with both? Do we pay the fee twice, or how does that look? What are our options going forward?
I don't know 100%, but I did discuss with them in collecting the information. The board's wish to open it up and pursue a full-time superintendent position first. If that was unsuccessful, then to move into the search for an interim. They said that they would they'd be able to help us on both, but I didn't know, I have no information about whether that is included, whether the interim search would be included in that.
Or it'll be an additional cost on top of, because I'm assuming the state only reimburses the one time per year.
One-time search,
right?
yeah.
Hopefully no one needs to bring that up. Okay.
The benefit though, what they do is included in that information I sent to you was 2 packets that they put together for other schools, and that would still be utilizable, I guess, or we can still utilize that if we then went to an interim, and everything would still be the same, it'd just be a little different mentality in who we were looking for. So that could be transferred very easily to that second phase that we did get to that point. Derek, did you have a question?
Yeah, so I'm fairly new to this, but a question I have is, so if we hire these folks and we get a candidate that independently comes and wants to be interviewed for the position and what have you, would they have to go through ISBA? Or how does that work? So if you get independent.
We hire them to conduct a search and advertise it through their, and that includes anybody that wants, so if someone came over from Valley View or someone just brought in there, it'd be the same thing. It's if you advertise and utilize their services, you'd still pay them. The additional money though would, anybody who came in, they would still help us analyze and go through their resume and help us qualify that candidate, whether they did come through that process or not.
Sure, okay. Thank you.
I just think it's really important for us right now to look at this and engage as many resources as we can from the public, from the school itself, administrators. Take that look for a long-term solution. If we, at that point in time, because it's late in the year, we feel that we haven't found something that's going to be a long-term fit at Milton, that we do call timeout for a year. We look at an interim situation, but I think at this time it makes sense to jump in with both our feet, go at that higher level and take a look, deep dive of all the state and national search, have this help from the outside. So it's, in the end, we'll approve it, but they're going to drive it. It's the right approach to go right now.
Actually, we need to amend the original motion to state which level we'd like to go to. We would amend the motion to include, level A or level B for this ISBA superintendent search.
Just a quick question. You said, so we get reimbursed by the state of how much?
6,000.
So, right, why don't you go full Monty? I might not say things right, I apologize, but you guys get what I mean. I mean, if you're gonna get reimbursed by the state, we're gonna jump in head first. And obviously, you know, I should have the experience and stuff like that, and we can discuss it, but I mean, it seems like it's in our best interest, both monetarily wise and what we're gonna get bang for our buck.
So, that would just be level B. So, if, make a motion to amend the motion.
I make a motion to amend the motion to include level B in the superintendent search.
And I'll second that.
Okay, the amendment, to the original motion has been moved and seconded. Any discussion? We'll call for the vote. All those in favor of the amendment to the motion, say aye. Aye. Opposed? So moved. And now we have the original motion on the table. So any discussion on the amended motion? Okay, seeing none. All in favor of the motion on the table?
Point of information, can you just restate the motion for clarification so everyone knows exactly what we're voting on this time?
Sure. So the motion on the table is to approve the ISBA superintendent search utilizing the full amount, the $8,300 amount, utilizing them to help us, and that is the stated motion. So, any more discussion? Okay. Seeing none, we'll move, call for the vote. All in favor of item 7K, superintendent search utilizing ISBA level B search. In favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? So moved. Item 7I, designate a board member and staff member to be main contact during superintendent search. So to work with the ISBA to help present or put together that packet, they need a board member, which I would nominate Becky if she would be so inclined to help out with that. As a backup? Sure.
So I was hoping for a second contact for the superintendent search. It would just be with ISBA, is that correct? So I would like to be one of the contacts, but I was also hoping that I could get a backup contact, possibly Lori Buckway in our payroll department, if she's interested, for just part of July.
Lori, by show of your hand, would that be all right? Okay. No, that would be just for her, because your vacation is,
From the 11th process. And the whole process. Are we gonna try to, is that gonna, how long do they give us? How long will they say?
so
give us
it's
2
up,
weeks
it's up to us how fast we want to move, but typically it takes a week to build
that portfolio?
that portfolio, and then they would send it to us, and if, I don't think, if we need to make a decision, we'd have an immediate meeting, but if not, they'd send it to us and we would just, unless there's any issues with it, we would be all right. But they would work with one board member and one staff member to facilitate that, and then they would advertise it. Advertising is however long we want to open it, leave it open, depending on how many results we get, so it'd be 2 to 3 weeks. So, and then we go into the interview process. So all told, it could take, hopefully we would have than 6 to 8 weeks. Or quicker. No, the whole process with interviews and everything.
I was just pulling up my calendar. So today's June 10th. So if it takes us a week to build the portfolio, we could have it posted and ready to go by the 17th. And then if we leave it open for 2 weeks, or do we leave it open as we
2
interview?
to 3 weeks.
The ISBA?
It's typically open for 2 to 3 weeks, and then you collect everybody's, and then go through kind of a weeding process. And then they would help us with that, yeah.
4th of July, and then after 4th, do the weeding process, it closes, do the weeding process between now and whatever. I'm sure there's vacations in between that time, but throughout that time, you're past the 4th, just before Labor Day. That makes sense.
So then after they do the weeding process, then we would work to phone interview them, and then selection, smaller selection population. Then we could utilize a public forum or a public interview process, as well as our own interview process. And so you're looking at another couple weeks of doing that to get down to the final selection.
Who, since you've been through this process before, how does the phone interviews work? Is that just done through one person? Do we have to call a special meeting? Do we come in and put them on a conference call?
It depends, utilizing somebody from the board usually, or we can designate someone to do the phone interviews. In the past, it's been done by the chairman, or if someone has a interview background, an HR background, something like that, they can, we can designate someone as our representative to do it. But it is someone who has questions that are given to them and then answered. So you ask everybody the same question, and then the results are brought to the board. Is there anybody who would like to volunteer to work with the ISBA? It's MSD. Yep.
And I'd be happy to sit on phone interviews if they need.
So would you be the backup then, and for Marianne, in case Marianne's available for questions? Okay. All right. So make a motion for adoption of designated staff and board members. Go ahead and make a motion that.
I make a motion that designated Becky, right? Okay, as staff. And Lori as a backup, and Trustee Blackwell and McConkey or contact.
All right. Any more discussion?
I have a concern that's indirectly related. Can we just about the decision process, the transition process over the next 2 months? Is that something that can be discussed at this time, or do we need to put it somewhere else?
Is it regarding the search?
It's not regarding the search. It's regarding, so maybe could I?
Yeah, next time, because we don't have any more action or items on there. If you have a question or designate, it should be something brought to the board, or is it?
Well, I feel like it's something the board needs to, but there's no action per se that needs to be taken, so maybe we'll just communicate it through email. Is that okay? If you deem that there's no action, if I email it to you, and you deem that there's no action taken, can you share that information via email through the rest of the board?
Sure, as long as there's no discussion or decision.
Right, just sharing information.
Carry over. No. Is there a second? Okay. Any more discussion? All right, seeing none, we'll call for the vote. Item 7I, designation of a board member, Marianne Blackwell, and a backup, Alicia McConkey, and a staff member, Becky Worley, and Lori Buckway, got it right, as a designated contact for the superintendent search with ISBA. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? So moved. We have no signed in visitors, so we'll move past item 8. Okay. All right, item 9, adjournment.
I make a motion to adjourn.
I second that.
It's been moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? So moved. We are adjourned. Thank you for coming.
He doesn't know who I am.